Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can't, if somebody could just type into the chat box if they can't hear me, that would be great. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mira, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications here at CID. And today, oh great, you can hear me. And today I'm going to be talking with Susie, who is our Executive Director. And we're going to be having a conversation about fiscal sponsorship because it's something that a lot of people aren't very familiar with. We get a lot of kind of frequently asked questions, so we thought it would be great to just give everybody the opportunity to send any kind of questions, no matter how simple they are. There is no such thing as a bad question our way. And if you do have questions or just thoughts that you want to share, just feel free to type them into the chat box and make sure that they're addressed to everyone so everybody can see the questions. And we'll just address them as we go. And then at the end, I'll also be sending along a couple of resources that Susie and I are going to talk about so that you can do your own research on fiscal sponsorship as well. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And Susie, I guess you can start by telling us, what is fiscal sponsorship?
Okay, so fiscal sponsorship is actually a construction that started well over 60 years ago so that the work of charitable organizations could be extended without having to create lots more charitable organizations. So it's actually got a history that dates back into the 1800s with the government, and it is approved by the Internal Revenue Service. And basically what it is it enables nonprofit organizations to sponsor and to work with a project or another organization that does not have charitable tax exempt status and extend their own tax exempt status to that project. So it's a way of working within the Internal Revenue tax system so that people who make a charitable contribution or foundations that give a grant can give to a project that doesn't have its own tax exempt status.
Right. So why would a filmmaker want to work with a fiscal sponsor?
So if you're a filmmaker, you may decide to set up your own nonprofit organization. That's a possibility, but it involves a good deal of work to do that and also ongoing reporting and so forth. So rather than have to do that so that you could accept tax deductible contributions from people and to get grants, you might set up an arrangement with what's called a fiscal sponsor, or with an organization that has charitable tax status, it's called a 501c3 tax status, so that you can get charitable contributions for your project.
So are there different models of fiscal sponsorship, or maybe talk a little bit about that?
There are. There are many different ways to do fiscal sponsorship. There's actually a book that's widely recognized as the authority on the best ways to do fiscal sponsorship. It's called 6 Ways to Do It Right, written by Gregory Colvin. You can purchase that book online. You can also read more about it at a website that's maintained called the Fiscal Sponsor Directory. And we're going to send you out the links to that and some information about the book as well, so that you can have it and do your own research. But if you just Google Fiscal Sponsor Directory, you'll see the site that I'm talking about, and it lists many organizations that are fiscal sponsors by state, and as well as just by name. So you can peruse that, and it will give you information about some of the different services that each fiscal sponsor offers.
So I know that I'm assuming all fiscal sponsors work a little bit differently, right? So, and I know that you can't speak to other fiscal sponsors, but maybe explain a little bit about CID's model.
So you're absolutely right. different fiscal sponsors will work in a variety of ways with projects and with other organizations that they sponsor. One of the big differences is, and a very important difference is exactly is how the money itself is handled. And some fiscal sponsors will work things so that when the funds come in from a grant or a donation, the fiscal sponsor will deduct an administrative fee and then hand the funds over in one check to you, the filmmaker. Other fiscal sponsors, and this is the way that we do it at CID, will take with the funds that come in, and we will actually then pay out project bills and so forth, so that we administer those funds directly, paying out expenses that you incur for the project. Different people feel differently about how that works for them and their projects. And that's one of the things that you want to consider when you're thinking about a fiscal sponsor, is to understand exactly how the funds will come to you and the project.
So somebody who is more hands-off might like a model like ours, where we're taking care of paying all of the invoices, managing all the finances, but somebody who really wants to be in control of that might prefer a model where they have more.
Right. And in addition to that, the other part to think about is that, let's say you get a large grant. We'll just pick a number. You're lucky. You get $100,000. If the fiscal sponsor merely deducts their fee and then gives you the $95,000, you will then have to pay all of the taxes. You will then get that as income, because the fiscal sponsor will give you a 1099 for the $95,000. If that were to come, let's say, at the end of the year, and you couldn't expense all of that because your project couldn't spend the money fast enough, you'd have a fairly large tax burden. So it's something that you really want to think about. And, if depending on what your own setup is, whether you have an LLC, you're incorporated, or you're just operating as a single filmmaker, there might be advantages or disadvantage to that. So it's an important consideration.
And then there's also all types of reporting that comes along with getting that kind of money, and that's something that some fiscal sponsors help with and others don't.
Exactly. So how that funding is reported on, the financial reports, whether you would then do it, does the fiscal sponsor do it? These are some of the things that you work out as you look for a fiscal sponsor. So let's take you've got a new project, you're thinking about trying to find a fiscal sponsor. What are some of the things you might want to consider? You'll want to consider the nature of your project, whether or not you want to go with a fiscal sponsor who's in the media field, like the Center for Independent Documentary, or whether you would go with a fiscal sponsor that might be related to the subject matter in your film. You might want to align yourself with an activist organization that is related to the work. Sometimes that can work really well. Sometimes that's problematic for film projects because they find that they're in a fundraising conflict around the subject matter with the organization that they might partner with. So that's something you really want to think about. Will you really be able to, you don't want to be in a situation where you're competing with that organization for fundraising. So that's one consideration. Then you want to look at, okay, how will the sponsor work with me? What kinds of things can they offer me besides just being my tax exempt, my way of getting a tax exemption from my donors? In our case, here at the center, we really see ourselves as a real partner in the project. So we actually don't even call it a fiscal sponsor agreement. We call it a co-production agreement. And we very much like to partner with our producers in any way that we can. So that means if there's consulting we can do to help you figure out a fundraising plan, strategy, while we can't write grant proposals for our producers, we definitely do look at drafts, make edits on those proposals. We work with you to try and figure out places to go. I'll give you an example. This week was National Endowment for the Arts week for grant proposals. And we had 13 filmmakers putting in proposals this week. So it was a really busy week for us because we actually were inputting that material as well as helping our filmmakers with the material, their parts of that process as well. So partnership in terms of helping with advice is something you want to be looking for as well. And that depends on how much advice you think you might need. Another aspect that you want to consider, you know, in looking at this is when the film is done, will your partner sponsoring organization be able to help you with getting it out there as well? So those are some of the big considerations, I think.
So, so maybe talk a little bit about, you know, you mentioned how we help people apply for grants, how we help with distribution. Maybe talk a little bit about, is there a certain part of the process where a filmmaker needs to come to us, or can we help them kind of anywhere along the way? Do they need to come to us at the very beginning, in the middle, in the end, kind of where, what can we do?
We like to get involved early on in the process because we get to know you better as a filmmaker. There's more we can do if we can get involved early, but we do get involved at any stage of the project. Usually not so much when the project is already completed and it's outreach and distribution, though that has happened. Generally speaking, at any point in the process, we are open to collaboration, and really what we're looking for when we evaluate a project is a really good, strong story. The quality of that story and its and the storyteller, you. Do you have the ability to produce the film you are wanting to make? So we are looking for budgets that reflect. It doesn't have to be a big budget, it can be a small budget, but that will reflect the actual work that you're proposing to do. We know a lot of people are trying to figure that out, and so that's one of the things we help people do is to come, you know, to look at their budgets, to come up with a budget that really works for that film, and you know, help to make that story the best it can be.
So somebody can come to us, can apply for sponsorship with us, even if they don't have a budget.
Yeah, well, we would like it if you get you the best one out you can, so we understand what you're thinking, and it helps us to see how much you know about what you're doing. Obviously, the more experienced you are and the better the work samples that you've got, the easier it is for us to feel completely confident in that project. That being said, we do work with first-time filmmakers. We like to see that they have the ability to tell a story, if they haven't done so visually, that they understand what that's going to take and that they can do it in their writing. So storytelling ability, whether verbal, visual, we want to see that.
So you said that when we were talking about criteria for, you know, judging what's a good fiscal sponsor for you, what are the other things that people could consider? I know there are certain types of fiscal sponsors who can't apply for certain types of grants. Is that right? That's
correct. So some fiscal sponsors may not be in a position to help you apply for federal grants, like this week with National Endowment for the Arts. Not everyone will apply for federal grants, as they require a lot of reporting. And not everyone will be willing to take, let's say, online contributions. So you want to make sure what ways of processing contributions your potential fiscal sponsor has, whether they'll be willing to work with you to, let's say, take a stock contribution, or to set up a, a fundraising campaign using Kickstarter or Facebook, all of these other kinds of things. So because all of those things are labor intensive and not every fiscal sponsor does them. So you want to ask about that.
Okay, so we can take a question that came in from someone prior to the webinar. I'm not sure if she's here, but her question was, how are the accounts kept? So when a contribution does come in for a project, what happens? What does that process look like?
Okay, so let's say you get a contribution online through a credit card donation. When that comes in, you get notified that the donation has come. We always suggest that you immediately write a personal thank you note, very important. We are going to send a thank you note to your donor and a tax receipt for their financial records, but you want to be capturing that donor in your own mailing list and Excel files, as well as writing them a personal note, because you're going to want to ask them again. If it comes in by check or any other form, we'll be notifying you right away. And then we send out weekly financial statements, which is another thing you want to find out about any potential fiscal sponsor is, how do you know what's in what money is there for your project? So in our case, you can have financial statements sent to you daily if you would like. Generally speaking, we send them out weekly, every Monday morning.
So where does the money go when it comes in? Does each project have its own account, or does everything go into one? Maybe explain that.
So every project has set up its not its own bank account, but its own account on our bookkeeping, so they're kept completely separate. And you would get a report just on your project, so you can see what funds have come in. And since we pay out the bills for our projects, you would also see what things have been paid out. We have invoices sent in constantly. You send in your invoices, and then we actually pay bills pretty much daily. So you would be able to see which things have been paid that week and what funds have come in.
So when a filmmaker wants access to their funds, either for to pay a bill or for reimbursement, they request that directly from us.
Correct. Okay. You just send in an invoice or a reimbursement request, and the payments are made directly. At the end of the year, we do send 1099s to all of the people that have been paid for the projects, anything over $600, which is what's required by law. And that's another thing that you'll want to find out if your fiscal sponsor is going to be handling those things, or if they're, again, as I mentioned earlier, if they're just turning the money over to you, then you would be responsible for that. But since the way we do it, we pay everything directly, we go ahead and send out all of those required forms.
And so what, and again, this is different with every fiscal sponsor, but what fee does the center take?
So, and when you look at the fiscal sponsor directory, I think that the fees are all listed there. They vary widely. In our case, we charge a straight 5% fee, administrative fee, on any funds that come to us. So that is the only fee we have. We do not charge any kind of fees for looking at your proposals or any other of the work we do. Everything is included in that. The only other fee that there is actually a fee from the bank. If you do any kind of online contributions where there's credit cards involved, then the bank charges a credit card fee, and the project does pay for those credit card fees. And that's 3.5% at the moment.
So we can take another question that came in from a filmmaker. Should I apply for more than one fiscal sponsorship if I plan to film in 2 different states or more?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a tricky question because most of the time, people, I think, prefer to just go with one fiscal sponsor. And the main reason for this is keeping all of your bookkeeping and accounting in one place. That being said, there are times when there are certain funders who will only fund, let's say, in their state. The perfect example for filmmakers would be a grant from NISCA, which New York State Council on the Arts, and you have to have a New York organization in order to make that application. So if it were a project that CID had, and it was a really strong contender for a NISCA grant, then I would say, we would try and set you up. And we've done this in the past, where we've worked with Women Make Movies, for example, and they will handle that application. And we've done the same for their projects on things that are here in New England. So I think, it's not advisable to do it, again, because what you really want to do is keep all of your accounting in one place if you can.
And I just want to remind people, if you have questions, feel free to just enter them into the chat box, address them to everyone, and then Susie and I can answer them as they come up. Okay, so it can be important then to choose a fiscal sponsor who's local to your area, depending on what your needs are.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of considerations. One of them is definitely geography. If you've got a project that you think you've got a funder who's will only give to an organization that's in your area, then you need to look for a fiscal sponsor there. If that's what's required. What we mostly find is that it really doesn't matter for most media projects. For the most part, you will find that most of the funders that we encounter are not going to require that kind of geographic situation. So, I think it really depends on your project itself, the potential funders that you might have, and talking to your, the fiscal sponsors that you're considering, and seeing, if they can handle an application to the places that you are most likely to get your money from.
Okay. So another question that came in is, what types of referrals are provided by CID?
Okay, I'm not really sure what the questioner meant about referrals. I'm going to guess that you might be meaning what kind of potential funders. And we do try and work with people to figure out funding possibilities. That said, it's not easy. We, like everyone else, will go to the online foundation directory and take a look and see what we can find. We did, sorry, we have a thing on the screen there. But you will find that in terms of where we can, what referrals we can give, it's going to be based a lot on our 36 years of fundraising experience. We're really fortunate today to have Tony Lugalbo on with us. Tony's been our board president for many, many, many years. And I just want to give a shout out to him and thank him for joining us today. And over all that 36 years, Tony's been on our board, and it's really, really, really great to have you here today, Tony. So we've, over that 36 years, gotten funds from most major foundations in the country. There are many, that said, there's many small family foundations, new ones coming all the time. And basically, this is just research. And we can help with that, but that's something that each filmmaker really needs to learn how to do. And you should all be doing that.
So it looks like we have a couple of questions. The first one is about cross-border donations. Are there similar fiscal sponsorship laws in Canada, the UK? Can one do fundraising using different fiscal sponsors to give donations from different citizens or countries a tax break?
Okay, you're outside my league right there. Don't know the answer to that. Yeah, and this actually brings up another question, which is working with filmmakers from other countries, projects from other countries. We are a small organization, so we are not operating outside of our capacity, and our capacity limits are basically this country. We have occasionally worked with projects that are not, that are filmmakers who are US citizens who are living abroad, but they have US tax IDs. Generally speaking, we do not work, with filmmakers from outside the country. And part of that is because we don't have the capacity to keep up with any of the foreign tax laws. It's pretty much enough to keep up with the United States tax laws. So I can't answer your questions about the UK. However, Gregory Colvin, who wrote 6 Ways to Do It Right, and is a West Coast attorney. And when you look up the book and so forth, you will see you could actually pose that question to him. This is a question that I think is answered best by a tax attorney or by an accountant familiar with foreign tax law.
And then a question, another question. You pay our vendors, crew, etc. directly after we forward their invoice to you, or we invoice you so that we can reimburse them ourselves?
In our case, and again, different fiscal sponsors do this differently, but the way we do it is that we would reimburse the person directly. We would pay your vendors directly, and we would, pay all of the contractors directly.
And then another question, would like to know in 2017 the scale of the fund raised for the Fiscal Sponsorship Partnership.
Scale of the funds raised. So I guess you're asking about how much money came through our organization. About $3.5 million in 2017.
And then another question, do filmmakers ever find that they don't spend all of the grant money?
I've never had that happen. That's not exactly true. That's not true. I'm wrong. Yes, that has happened. It's very rare. For the most part, people are always finding that their expenses are greater than what they thought. Though we have had a couple of instances, most notably on a National Endowment for the Humanities grant, where we actually did not spend all of the funds. And since we just get that funding on a reimbursement basis, we did not request all of the money, which I think made them very happy and surprised.
So then what happens to that leftover money?
Well, in the case of the National Endowment for the Humanities, we just didn't take it, so they kept it. If, let's say, there was funds that had come for the project, I suppose it could either go back to the funder, or it could go to another purpose that the funder would approve of. But as I said, that has happened so rarely. For the most part, most filmmakers will find that they're having trouble raising enough money, not ever having too much.
Another question. What is the acceptance rate of CID fiscal sponsorship applications? How competitive is it to partner with CID?
We do get a lot of applications, and I would say it's fairly competitive. But again, it's all about the story that you have. And so I would encourage everyone to apply. I think, as I said, we've worked with people who maybe don't have as much experience. We've started working with a lot of people at the beginning of their career, and there are people that we started working with 35 years ago that we are still partnering with today. And some of them were brand new filmmakers, and you know, and you know, we find that if you're a good storyteller or you have a really good story to tell, we want to hear from you. So competitive, yes, but please apply. And there's no cost to apply.
Yes, that was another question that came in. Can I have my material reviewed before I apply for sponsorship, and what are the costs?
So no need to have your material reviewed before, because we're going to review it when you send it. So, and there's no cost. So please go ahead and prepare your materials, and it's pretty straightforward. What we're looking for, it's on our website, and you'll be sending it to Mira, and it will be reviewed here. Basically, what we're looking for is a solid, you know, brief project description. Keep it to under 3 pages if you can. A budget, resumes, and if you've got some sample work, including if you've got samples from, you know, what you've already maybe shot for the project or previous work, send us that as well. Links are great to a place online for us to view it. So, and we take those on an ongoing basis, anytime.
And all of this information is also up on our website. If you go to www.documentaries.org and then click on Fiscal Sponsorship at the top of the page, you'll see requirements, what we asked, and all of that. Another question, how many fiscal sponsorship CID partnered with in 2017, and how many you are looking for this year?
You know, I don't have exact numbers, and we don't have an exact number on how many we're looking for. We are taking new projects now. We have a lot of films that have just been finishing up. I'd say at the moment we have between 90 and 100 films in various stages of production or recent release. And so we have, and a lot that are really finishing up. So we are looking for new projects, and maybe it's yours.
So really, it's all about our bandwidth and how many projects we have at any given stage of production.
Exactly, exactly.
And another question, once you apply, how long before you reach a decision?
We try and turn it around pretty quick. So within a couple weeks would be very reasonable. Next week, and David Pawlowski is on here. Hi, David. Next week, we have our Copkind CID Film Camp, and David has been one of our past campers. And so this next week, there will be no project reviews because we'll be up doing our film camp. And if you don't know about that, I hope you'll go to our website and take a look at it. It's a great week for filmmakers to come up and bring their work in progress and problem solve around their work in progress, and have a week of what we call radical relaxation, a chance to sort of recharge your battery and have a great week with your fellow filmmakers.
And another note about the camp is you actually don't have to be fiscally, you don't have to be using CID as your fiscal sponsor to apply for that camp. So.
Right.
Okay, do you sponsor hybrid documentaries, a doc with significant narrative elements?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're really interested in new forms. We've actually been involved with apps, with sort of a combination, sort of hybrid narrative doc, different experimental kinds of forms. So we're real interested in looking for some VR projects too. Nobody's come with a VR project. We're kind of interested in that. So if you got one, bring it. We're interested.
Has CID ever worked with filmmakers turning docs into narrative features?
Yes, we have. We've actually, we've done that. And we've also, we've even had one of our films get turned into a Broadway play. So it was a documentary, and now you can see it on Broadway. It's
the Powder and the Glory?
The Powder and the Glory, which on Broadway has a different name, which I'm drawing a blank on at the moment. But so, yeah, we're interested in that too.
Okay, so another question that we had talked about. So what if, we talked about what happens if there's money left over in the account. What happens if, for whatever reason, the project can't be finished?
Okay, good question. So this does happen. Not every project gets completed. For the most part, we find that people make their very, very best effort to get the project done. And usually it just takes a long time. And we're fine with that because we know it takes a long time to do this work. I think the longest project we've had ongoing, trying to get it done, is probably close to 20 years. And it did eventually get done. So that being said, we're willing to hang in there a long time to work with you and get your work done. But if, let's say, it just can't get done, then usually the funds are pretty much spent at that point already, or they might have to get returned to a funder. But for the most part, we're willing to hang in with you for a long time to make it work.
So there's no time limit on how long?
No time limit. We know these things take a long time. I don't know what the average would be, but I'm going to guess it's at least 4 to 5 years for most film projects that we work with. Many much longer.
Looks like we have a few more questions here. Let's see. Okay. Does having a well-known fiscal sponsor affect how competitive you are for grants?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that that funders know who we are, and I know they know who we are, and I think that they have seen the quality work that has been done with our organization. I think they know that the value of the advice that people will get from us, and that we will make sure that their funds are spent the way they were meant to be spent. We're very careful about making sure that reports get to funders, and funders like to know that they're going to have that accountability. So I think it does make a difference. And there are many quality fiscal sponsors that work in the media field, and I think that funders do know who we are and know the kind of work that comes from each of our organizations.
Is there a general range of budget for the project CID takes on? Does CID have a floor or ceiling on budgets for potential projects?
No, we don't. I'd like to tell you that the largest budget projects were the best. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes those tiny budgets and a work produced that's well produced by a filmmaker working on their own and working really cheap is often, can look just as good as the one where we had a budget of $1 million. So we have some work that's high-end budgets, $1 million, $1.5 million, and then we have some projects that are $10,000, $15,000. Neither budget is necessarily better or correct. They are correct for that project. That's the way I like to see it.
So when someone sends in a budget when they're applying for fiscal sponsorship, we're not really looking at the total amount. It's about how much thought has been put into it and how accurate it is for that goals project that they're setting.
Exactly. So, a small budget can be completely appropriate for a project that's, where the producer is basically doing everything and is really, keeping it really small. And that's perfectly fine. We're really just looking to see, have you got a budget that's appropriate to what you're proposing to do?
And we understand also that budgets change as the budget that you send us initially is not necessarily going to be the budget that you end up with.
Right. And the budget is a working document. So your budget is really, it's the story of how you're actually going to physically do the work. So, we know that that's a changing, it's a moving target as you revision and do the actual film. Things will change.
Do you connect us to legal resources?
We certainly try. For example, this week up at camp, we'll be bringing a entertainment attorney, Sandy Foreman, who's been very generous with her time. And actually, I believe, we did have a webinar with her a couple months ago. It wasn't recorded, unfortunately. But yes, we can hook you up with legal resources. They're not going to be free, although I can tell you where you can go to find free legal resources. But we do, we can give you those kinds of recommendations. And the same goes with insurance. And for that matter, we try and hook people up, between like videographers, editors. So we try and be a resource of connecting filmmakers with other kinds of people that they might want to work with.
And on the insurance note, while we're at it, is it possible for people to get insurance through CID, certain types of insurance through CID?
It might be. There are times when some production and things can be covered. But usually most people will have their own insurance.
So there's a couple more questions. Is CID also putting funds it raises into films or just taking fees off of fiscal sponsorship, third-party donations?
Good question. We have to raise the 5% fee that the administrative fee does not cover all the costs to run CID. We actually subsidize the work that we do for projects. So, you might find that other fiscal sponsors are charging actually much higher fees. So we're not putting any of our own money into projects. But we are basically providing the service that we do at a subsidized rate to you.
Let's see. Okay. Beyond the 5% fee, does CID also take a piece of back-end success fee? And what kind of credits does CID require?
Okay. No, we don't take a back-end fee. Unless, of course, we're handling, and we do actually handle some of the distribution money for some projects. They prefer us to do that sometimes, in which case it's still the same 5%. And for credit, as I mentioned earlier on, we don't call this fiscal sponsorship really. For us, it's really co-production. So we actually have a production agreement in our agreement. And so we ask for produced in association with credit, which most people just put at the end of the body of their credits.
Can CID accept online contributions?
Absolutely. We can accept any kind of way that you can think of to get money to your project. I think we've pretty much done them all. We certainly do online credit card contributions. We do Kickstarter, Facebook. We take stock donations. We've taken things for auction and auctioned things off. We have taken cars and sold them. If there's a way to get money for your project, we're willing to try it out.
Okay, and a message from Vinka Jarrett. I am an entertainment attorney focused on films and television for nearly 20 years. For those of you that qualify, you can access Lawyers for the Arts in Boston as well. Thank you, Vinka. Thanks,
Vinka. Good to see you here.
Okay, another question. Do I have to do LLC or should I just do a DBA before applying for fiscal sponsorship, or can I do that after I get grants?
Okay, whoever asked that question, aren't you lucky, because Vinka is on here. And maybe Vinka wants to pop the answer to that question in the chat box there. But I would say, that's for our point of view, it isn't important to us whether you have an LLC or you're just doing a DBA, or you just are just yourself. For us, that's not important. For you, however, it makes a great deal of difference. So your legal setup is something that you should speak with an attorney about and your accountant about. So accountant or attorney, and Vinka can tell you why probably better than I can. So Vinka, if you want to post your phone number in the chat box, feel free.
So Vinka actually replied, you should do an LLC to protect your assets outside of the film and protect from liability, also important for insurance.
Exactly. For E&O, absolutely. Thanks, Vinka.
And something else to note, we have had filmmakers who have not had an LLC when they've started working with us, and then we've redone their contract or their agreement with us later to reflect the LLC. So you can change that at any point. Okay. Let's see. So we're starting to get towards the end here. If anybody else has any questions before we go, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Let's see. I think we might have covered everything. So for those of you who are interested in fiscal sponsorship with CID after listening to this, or who have more questions, you can feel free to follow up with us. You can reach out to me, and I will put my contact information in the email that I send to everyone afterwards, along with links to a couple of other resources that Susie mentioned. It looks like we have another question. When it comes to estimating, do you cover crew fees? Are they less than commercial rates?
When it comes to estimating crew fees. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what you mean here. I think you're asking a budgeting question, more or less.
Yeah, when it comes to budgeting.
Okay, great. Okay, a budgeting question. Okay, so, when you're developing your budget, if you're talking about for a grant proposal, yes, maybe, I would say, okay, good. All right. So what you want to be doing when you're developing your budget is, if you know your crew and you know their rates, use those rates if you've already got crew that you're working with. If you don't, yeah, use commercial rates, for the area where you are. You may also, be looking at rates for places across the country, and you may not know what those local rates are. That's something that we can help with. If you're working with us, I can sort of tell you, oh, this guy over here, these are the kind of rates you'd be looking at. But generally speaking, yes. There's a great resource online. It's a budgeting film budgeting site, and it has a lot of great sample budgets and resources. And I think if you'd like, I can throw that in with the resource list as well, so that you can take a look at it and see what other people are doing for budgets. Some of those are commercial. It'll have sample NEH budgets, as well as foundation kinds of budgets as well.
Another question, does CID help process available tax credits?
Yes, we do. Actually, we do. And I will say that CID was one of the founders of the Massachusetts Production Coalition, and we work very hard to help get the tax credits here in Massachusetts. And one of our major contributions to that process was to really advocate for the low-end tax credit, meaning that projects with budgets as low as $50,000 in Massachusetts could apply for the tax credit. So we are very happy to help our films apply for those tax credits. We've done so for several of our films. We're in the process of working on 2 tax credit applications right now. And it's a great benefit. If you don't know about tax credits, and we can add this to the list of another thing we can put, there is a tax credit guide, which I think the Sundance folks have put together, which will give you the information on tax credits all around the country. And it's something that you will definitely want to pursue.
If a filmmaker is paying themselves in their budget, do we invoice CID in the same way we would with any other vendor or independent contractor?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you will get a 1099 for just what you've billed for, just for your services. But you would definitely want to be building into your budgets, another budget issue, money so that you can get paid.
Where can we find contracts for producers and directors for indie docs?
Contracts. I'm not really sure what kind of contracts you mean. If you're looking for sample work for hire releases or things like that.
I think this says you need an attorney.
Yeah.
So.
Right. I would say that, those are the kinds of, I think that when you're talking about contracts, I'm thinking that maybe you're looking for those kinds of agreements between people. I think that's right. You'll want to have those drawn up with an attorney.
Do you pay for talent involved in a documentary? Maybe actors from?
Well, I mean, if that's part of the budget, yes. Generally speaking, talent, like everyone else, would be paid.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
And I would like to ask of everyone here, if you don't mind, are there any particular topics that you would like us to pursue in future webinars? We've been thinking about some different ideas, and it would be good to know what you need. So if you don't mind just letting us know, type those in, that would be really helpful.
Another question, do you consult budget before dispersing funds?
Yes. Does it have to be exactly to the budget? It really depends. I mean, we have to do that. That's part of our responsibility. But for example, if you've got funds from the National Endowment for the Arts or the National Endowment for the Humanities, we're required to stay within the budget. We have certain ability to move some funds around. But if not, if there's a change in the budget, then what we need to do, or where funds need to go, then we need to get approval from the funder to make those shifts. So yes, we do. That's part of what we're required to keep an eye on and to be accountable for. That's why we exist.
Okay. Well, on that note, we've almost reached the bottom of the hour, and thank you all again so much for joining us. We are actually going to be taking a break. These webinars have been monthly, but next month we're going to be taking a break because of camp and vacations. So we'll be returning in September with our next webinar. So if you do have topics that you're interested in, please let us know so that we can make sure to cover those sometime in the future. Great.
And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us today. We really appreciate you being here, and hope we'll see a proposal from you soon, and let us know what you're doing for your work. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.